The plan to open by Christmas and things getting under control in Victoria, and we're coming to a period now where we're not going to have any elections, state or federal, for a while. Was there any indication out of the National Cabinet today about a more willing or better preparedness to adopt a national hotspot definition rather than a resort to border closures again in the future should there be more outbreaks?
Well, the focus of the discussion, I think, was moving more towards the public health capability to ensure that you wouldn't need those sort of closures in the future. I mean, where Victoria has been able to get to now, I'm sure Paul will agree, we're very pleased that those numbers are now where they are, and obviously that provides the opportunity to open up again. And I'm sure all Victorians, and particularly those in Melbourne, would like to see that occur. And I understand the Premier will make some further announcements this weekend. That's a matter for him to do, as he regularly does each weekend. And so we're obviously keen to see that opening up, whether it be in the hospitality sector or other parts of the economy. The shutdown in Melbourne has had obviously a terrible impact on Victorians, on their mental health, on their economy. The Premier knows that, and so we continue to encourage him and his government to move forward with reopening there. But what will prevent a further set of measures having to be put in place in Australia is the strength of the public health system to respond to any outbreaks, and that's why the work of Dr. Finkel is so important, because that stress testing and match fitness of the tracing regime. I mean, it will be a good problem to have, we hope, that our contact tracers will have no sort of live experience in the weeks and months ahead. But the work that we're doing with those tracing regimes is to ensure they remain match fit, that they do the desktop exercises, they do the stress testing. And so if things were to occur, if there is an outbreak somewhere through whatever risk that may present, then we can have confidence that we can move quickly, as indeed New South Wales has done on so many occasions, to ensure that outbreak can be contained. So I look forward to the continuing opening up of the country. Western Australia, we understand there are some special circumstances there. I've made that very clear in Western Australia, the nature of their economy and how it works, and the Premier continues to maintain his position on that. That's a matter for him. But around the rest of the country, they have their timetables, and we look forward to that opening and the commitment by Christmas of this year. Certainly 7 out of the 8 states and territories will be open, and that'll be a great day for Australia. You never know. It might be 8.
The repatriation issue. Officials from your department said the other day that there were discussions going on with Melbourne about re-accepting international flights, and that would be a game changer. You mentioned just now that we might see something happening with Tasmania in coming weeks. How close is Melbourne to re-accepting?
Well, what I said about Tasmania is they are a reserve option, because there is not an international flight capacity reception arrangements in Tasmania. But I just wanted to be clear that there was no lack of willingness on the Tasmanians' part to be part of that process. They're very, very willing, and I indeed spoke separately to Premier Gutman earlier today. Yes, I have had these discussions with the Premier Dan Andrews, and we are hoping that they'll be able to make a move on being able to receive international arrivals. That day isn't here yet. But I know that it's a priority for the Premier, because he wants to see Victorians come home. Victorians are overseas. Many of those who are seeking to come back from around the world are from Victoria, and the ability to come and quarantine in their home city, I think, would be very welcome to them. So we look forward. I think that will give a great boost. You know, if we can get Victoria opened up again in the weeks ahead, preferably, or hopefully not longer than that, then that will really give us a bit more pace in getting people back before Christmas. Of those 26,000 that I said before, we want to get them home by Christmas, and that's what we're working to achieve.
Could you take a question on the subject, please?
Well, that's a matter for your colleagues.
Okay,
Will Australia move from a system of compulsory hotel quarantine to allowing quarantine in other settings? What will be the benchmark for that shift, and how many of the Australians stranded overseas are you committing to bring home by Christmas?
Well, I just answered the last question. It's our goal to get those 26,000 Australians home that were registered by Christmas. Now, whether we achieve that or not is going to be dependent on many factors. It's going to be dependent on the flights. It's going to be dependent on the continued cooperation of the states and territories. It's disappointing to hear about the arrangement that has occurred up there in Cairns, but as I said, I'll leave that to the Queensland Government. We've had good cooperation from the Queensland Government on these other caps, so that's what we're doing there. In terms of other forms of quarantine, that's the very questions you're asking are the same questions we're asking, and that's why we've set up the group today to go and do that work, identify what these other quarantine options are and how they can be used for different areas. I mean, we're already doing that when it comes to seasonal workers who are coming under the seasonal workers program. That's happening right now. That's been happening at Howard Springs. We're already doing it in Queensland with what I think is a very innovative on-farm quarantine arrangement when it comes to some of these seasonal workers as well. That's a good initiative. I know there's a lot of interest from universities to look at on-campus quarantine. I know that with large corporates there's a strong interest, in the National Coordination Commission under Nev Power's chairmanship has been looking at how corporates themselves can set up their own quarantine facilities under strict guidelines and standards, obviously overseen and accredited by state health authorities. But the more of these options we can identify, the more of the other capacity it frees up, and the more we can move back to sort of more normal arrangements. But there is no undue haste here. There are risks here. And so what we agreed today is, before we make any of those decisions, we want to know what the options are, we want to know whether they work, and we want to know whether they're safe. You don't want to build that aeroplane in the sky, you want to build it before it takes off. And that's exactly what we're doing.